All right, hi everyone. Thanks for coming and trekking it out here. We're really excited to have our first event at the New Lab. This one is pitted out as a New York City blockchain showcase. So along with Foam, we invited 4 other kind of really exciting companies in the blockchain space to present. So we're going to hear from a project called MakerDAO, which has a stablecoin and credit system on chain, Relevant, which is a curation market for media, LivePeer, which is a protocol for transcribing video on the blockchain, and Balance, which is a user-friendly Web3 wallet interface. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. So Foam is a project based on building a consensus-driven map of the world, and it's a protocol using blockchain technology. The project is really large in scope, and we've wanted to tackle bringing all of the location elements into blockchain technology. So this is everything from how do we actually encode geolocation into smart contracts, and with that we developed something called a crypto-spatial coordinate standard. How do we then actually visualize geospatial data on a blockchain? And with that, we've built something called the Spatial Index Visualizer. It's kind of a cross between a Bloomberg terminal and a Google Maps as a way to interact visually with blockchain information. And ultimately, what our protocol is trying to achieve is what we call proof of location. So a verified, trustless, decentralized way to verify where things have been. And so our current product, which is live now, which I'm going to spend most of this presentation on, is the Foam map. So this is on proof of location of things that don't move, what we call static proof of location, and that's points of interest data on a map, and I'll get into that. But ultimately where we're going with the project is something called dynamic proof of location. That's that we want to verify things that actually move around, like cars, people, machines, devices, etc. And with that, we use a low power radios and a time synchronization protocol to actually replicate a GPS on the ground, but open a marketplace for buying location proofs. So that's a bit out of scope for this presentation, and I'm going to speak about the Foam map and show you a demo. So Foam is about geospatial standards, protocols, and ultimately proof of location. And what we have launched so far on the Ethereum blockchain is the Foam map, which provides static proof of location. And this is a token curated registry of geographic locations. And by token curated registry, I mean a registry is like a list. But to be on this list, you have to use tokens as collateral. And you also run the risk of either being kicked off the list if you have inaccurate information. So why do we even care about this in the first place? We have tons of open source mapping today and a lot of proprietary mapping data hosted by Google, which is increasingly becoming more expensive. There are over 1 million people contributing to OpenStreetMaps, which is kind of a Wikipedia for mapping, but there are a ton of problems with vandalism and not enough incentive to actually check any of that data. So most recently, a kind of anti-Semitic hack happened where New York was renamed to Jewtropolis, and this was not caught by anyone, so it actually filtered into everything from City Bike, Street Easy, the Foam map, and Snapchat. And so that just kind of speaks to the way that we don't have any verification mechanisms for geodata today. We also had Pokemon players changing geographic data on OpenStreetMap. For example, putting a volcano at the New Lab, and all of a sudden fire Pokemon will appear. But every other app that uses OpenStreetMaps now has a volcano in Brooklyn. And so this is stuff that was really happening. And we even see issues with the US military's registry of locations being inaccurate and causing a lot of problems for people who try to build on top of it. And the industry reaction so far has been to kind of take all this open source data and close it off, what these companies call protecting the map. So you have companies like Mapbox, Microsoft, Facebook that take all the efforts of open source mappers, but then they run their own algorithms and proprietary verification mechanisms and then sell that data back to customers. And that doesn't really cut it for open source Web3 blockchain ecosystems. So we wanted to bring geolocation data into blockchain and provide a new verification incentive, so a reason to actually go and check the data. So how the Foam map token curated registry works, this is a graphic someone in our community made, which is quite fun. And so if you want to add a new location, for example, the Eiffel Tower, you actually have to stake tokens. And what that means is there's a limited supply of a token called Foam token on the blockchain. And to add to the map, you have to actually stake a value to it. So there's a minimum deposit. And if everyone's happy, your point will show up on the map. However, if someone finds an issue with your point and they think it's inaccurate or false or malicious, they can also deposit tokens against you. And this kind of creates a reward pool where everyone who's part of the Foam network, who's a cartographer and has a stake in the network, is then able to vote on that point. and can win tokens based on the outcome. And this is a way to curate the registry. So I'm going to move into a demo of what that means. So this is the foam map, token curated registry, and it's live right now on the main net of Ethereum, and you can find it yourself at map.foam.space. And so we have basically 3 types of different points on the map. You see blue ones, red ones, and green ones. And so blue ones are pending, which mean that they were just recently added, and you might want to investigate it if you are a curator. So here we see someone added WeWork Dumbo Heights. They staked 50 tokens in it, and they added a description, etc. But let's say, for example, I thought that this was inaccurate or wrong. I can actually then challenge this point by staking tokens against it, and it opens up a vote. So what we can see is, just today or so, maybe it's not there. There was a challenge I saw there. So for us, this is really interesting because we have basically this active live map of cartographers using it, and it's basically worldwide. So one of our most active locations is in Tokyo, Japan, Seoul, London, Paris, a village in Portugal. And we really see a lot of community-driven activity of people who care about their cities and locations. Might take a minute to load up. And we have a lot of really interesting kind of observations through seeing this. So questions come up of what language should points be added in. We see in the South China Sea people actually debating sovereignty and territorial lines and challenging disputed islands. But we also see kind of really unique personal points that you probably wouldn't find on different data. And so all this is really exciting and fun for us to see, but ultimately this registry on the blockchain will be able to be referenced and used by other applications. And so I'm going to go back to this in the presentation, but we've been experimenting with different kind of incentive mechanisms for participation in the map. And one of those has been to give out what we call what is called a non-fungible token. So instead of a token that can be exchanged the same for any other token, it's one that represents something unique. And we've been making these non-fungible tokens of actual buildings and locations. And if you had added them, you could win this kind of digital sticker. And so right now we're running this campaign for people who couldn't join this event here today with us, but also everyone here can join, is if you add a point in the region of the new lab, you can win an NFT of the new lab. And so we can see all these new points that have been added today, actually. People included this tag new lab event to show they were trying to participate in that event. So there's just a lot of different mechanisms and things to learn about from the map, and happy to speak more to it as well, but I'm gonna go back quickly to the presentation. So when we launched this network, we did so with a token sale where basically any consumer could join and participate if they proved that they actually knew what the protocol is about and they didn't want to just speculate. And as a global mapping project, we had over 1,000 initial participants, and this is kind of the results. So we had a really positive geographic distribution, which is a great start to this mapping project. And if you go into kind of any major city in any country, at least a few points are there. This shows currently like how many points are on the map. It's a bit outdated. We have currently over 7,000, but this chart shows how on the top, yellow ones were actually challenged, which means cartographers said, hey, this point's incorrect, or it doesn't belong there. And other people either removed them or not because they wanted to. And this is just kind of showing the growth over time of how people have been contributing to the map. And out of our total supply, more and more as it's being used, more of these tokens are kind of getting out of the circulation off the market and are actually being locked in the map. And those tokens being locked in the map are still owned by the people who put them there, but they're kind of putting their money where their mouth is and backing the map with value so that the veracity, the truthfulness, how much you can trust it actually grows with the more value of tokens staked behind it. Just some more statistics, like our top cities are New York, San Francisco. A really interesting is this village in Portugal, Ponte de Lima, etc. And you can see the kinds of points people are adding and curating. So we have food, art, attraction as the biggest, blockchain locations, nightlife, etc. And this is kind of one of the most extreme examples of one of our cartographer community members. His name's Leaf. Every time he adds a point to the map, he actually makes a video recording of him being at the location. And it's really great to see. He's mostly doing Route 66, so kind of the middle of nowhere, like the oldest covered shed or Mickey Mantle's childhood home. But what's interesting is when we asked him, why are you, documenting this in such a way, he says, well, if anyone comes and challenges my point, I want to take my case to the community and show, no, I actually was there and these points are real. So that's super interesting. And a really serious example of what we call ground truthing. So actually going to locations, verifying them before you added it to the map. Other community members have been building really exciting services on top of our API. So one entity called Blocklytics has been making the Foam Daily Digest email. And every day you can see the number of new points that have been added to the map, the number of signals, which is something outside the scope of this presentation, and also the number of new challenges. And he highlights the most interesting maps, so it's really exciting to see people, hooking into this data and providing new services to the community. And as I mentioned, we're kind of have been testing these extrinsic mechanisms to try to incentivize participation. So a few months ago, we ran the Holiday Treasure Hunt, which consisted of 10 secret locations, where each day we gave out a riddle of that location. And if you added the correct point to the map, you won this NFT of the building. And so we had about 10 points, 10 riddles, and out of that, we had 500 new points added of people guessing or racing of trying to do that. So it shows kind of like different incentive models of how you can take intrinsic rewards and plug them into the protocol. So this was every day we had this riddle where you could win that NFT for the day. And this was what I mean, where of those points, for example, like Alan Turing's birthplace or the Moscow Planetarium, you win this digital image that lives on the blockchain and you're the only one who has it. So for this event, to celebrate the New York City Blockchain Showcase and the Foam map, we're doing a small campaign for today that all of you can participate in. This was just an example of the previous ones being given out. But we have made an NFT that will be a limited edition, so issued today, of the new lab, which is where we are hosted. So if you add a point to the Foam map today, we'll issue you this NFT. You can also meet Katya, one of my co-founders and chief creative officers, after the presentations and speak to her and learn more about the Foam map and sign up. That's also a way that you can get this NFT. We'll issue that to you within the next few days. And as part of that experiment, we wanted to kind of geofence locally to this area and bring a lot of attention to where Foam is headquartered. And for those who aren't actually here in New York, to also bring their attention to that area of the map and see what kind of results we can get. I think so far we had over 50 added today to this kind of zone. So I encourage you all to try it out either after this presentation with Katya or later tonight on your own time. So thank you all. Happy to take any questions briefly, but looking forward to next presentations as well. Thanks. Yeah, is there a mic?
Who had the question?
Yeah, our goal is not specifically to replace that, but it was really looking at the problem statement as if you have smart contracts that want to reference the real world. It's not going to be suitable for them to look off the blockchain because then you have to get in these questions of Oracle services or how do you trust that data not on the blockchain. So we had the starting point of how do we bring this data into this new economy. But ultimately we realized that's really not enough just having the data there. It's how do you actually verify it and know that it can be trusted. And that's really touching on this static mapping data, but we're really looking to tackle the full problem of location verification, and that's a replacement for GPS because it works great to figure out where you are, but you can just spoof the information and send it off to someone else. They can't check it. So in our system, it will be bi-directional. So you can find out your location, but you can talk back and basically buy a certificate about your location. So that's really the end goal, is to support location verification, whether it's static geodata or things that move around. Yeah?
Thinking of a situation where the token maybe becomes prohibitively expensive for someone, in a place where, just a smaller economy. What does the token supply look like, and how do you ensure that everyone can afford to stake?
Yeah, great question. So in the static proof of locations phase, the token is not inflationary. So we issued 300 million tokens. There's a minimum deposit to add data, which is currently 50 tokens, which might be something like $2. But the entire map and registry, all the parameters are governable. And this is something that like OpenStreetMap also doesn't allow, that if you're a participant, you actually have an ownership stake in the future of that protocol. And so all the parameters like minimum deposit, how long a vote lasts, the quorum that you need to pass a vote can all be changed. So if the token value, magically went up 1,000% tomorrow and now it costs $1,000 to add a point, there can be a community vote to lower the minimum deposit to 1 token or a fraction of a token. When we get to the dynamic proof of location with these radio nodes, that will be inflationary and there are mining rewards for that. I'll take like 2 more in the interest of time, but happy to speak after.
Hey, can you speak a little bit to the incentive structure behind submitting a challenge and then why anyone would want to vote on one?
Sure. The incentive for that one's a bit more clear than why you would add a point in the first place. But because there's a minimum deposit, let's say 50 tokens, if you successfully challenged it and won, you would win a % of those tokens. So there's like a pure financial incentive. If you initiate a challenge, you can win up to 40% of that pool. And then by voting as well, you're eligible for a smaller amount. So by either initiating a challenge or participating in a vote, somebody's going to have a payout of new tokens. Sure. Kind of the question of why you would add to OpenStreetMap. So there's tons of reasons of why people want to do mapping. They care about their local community, et cetera. In this case, it's to build up this valuable registry of information that may be referenced by other applications. And you as a cartographer may not have direct inflationary rewards because we think it's hard to reward subjective work that could be gamed, unlike mining rewards, which is computational. But over time, the token would become more scarce and you're a stakeholder and you have governance rights. And ultimately, if applications are hooking into this data, there may be ways to monetize being a point owner. But right now, it's really on believing in the protocol and wanting to be a stakeholder. Yeah, I'll take one more. Yeah.
Have you seen any instances of like malicious staking or challenging by, like the group that comes to mind would be like if 4chan decided that they wanted to tag somebody's house as like, whatever it is they want to do?
So far in our experience, people have been like pretty nervous about adding points. So there's a different project trying to tackle POI and rewarding people with Bitcoin. But you see that people add very scarce amount of info just to add as many points as they can to win the money. Where here people seem to be pretty like cautious of what they add. And I don't have the slide here, but most of points that are challenged within the first 3 days. So there's like an active amount of people kind of watching all the points. So we have had joke points, malicious points, spam points, but they've basically been filtered out and people won tokens off of